quick summary of U.S. history in 18 minutes. From exploration to independence, 1492 to 1789. Before Europeans set foot in the New World, the American continent had long been inhabited by indigenous tribes, commonly referred to as Native Americans. These communities were descendants of ancient Asian peoples who had crossed the Bering Strait during the last ice age, approximately 25,000 years ago. Migrating from Siberia into Alaska, they gradually spread across both North and South America, establishing diverse and independent civilizations, from the Iroquois and Apache in North America to the Maya and Inca in Central and South America. In October 1492, under the Spanish flag, Italian navigator Christopher Columbus landed on an island in the Caribbean. Though he was not the first to discover the Americas, his voyage opened the floodgates to an unprecedented wave of exploration and colonization by European powers. Over the following decades, imperial forces from Spain, Portugal, England, France, and the Netherlands descended upon the Americas, establishing vast colonies and extracting resources. Spain came to dominate most of South America and the southwestern regions of North America. France controlled large areas of Canada and the Mississippi River Basin. The Dutch settled in what was then called New Amsterdam, now known as New York City. The British Empire, in particular, focused on the northeastern coast of North America, establishing 13 colonies stretching from Massachusetts to Georgia. These colonies attracted hundreds of thousands of European settlers, including Puritans, Quakers, and Catholics fleeing religious persecution. They came in search of a new life, one of freedom and prosperity. Over 150 years, the 13 colonies grew rapidly in terms of economy, culture, and population. However, they remained tightly controlled by British trade regulations and taxation policies, tensions that would eventually become irreconcilable. Tensions reached a boiling point after the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, a global conflict between Britain and France, known in North America as the French and Indian War. Though Britain emerged victorious and took control of Canada, the war left it with enormous debts. To cover these costs, the British Parliament imposed a series of harsh taxes and laws on the American colonies, including the Stamp Act, Townshend Acts, and Tea Act. These policies sparked outrage, not only due to the financial burden, but also because of the principle: no taxation without representation. The colonies had no representatives in the British Parliament, yet were being forced to pay taxes. Tensions escalated into open defiance in 1773 during the Boston Tea Party, where American colonists dumped an entire shipment of British tea into the harbor in protest. In response, the British government imposed punitive measures, which only pushed the colonies closer together in unified resistance. In 1775, war erupted at Lexington and Concord, marking the start of the American Revolutionary War. On July 4, 1776, all 13 colonies declared independence through the Declaration of Independence, authored by Thomas Jefferson. This was not just a break from the British Crown, it was a bold political statement affirming the rights to freedom, equality, and life. Under the brilliant military leadership of George Washington, and with crucial financial and military support from France, the revolutionaries began to turn the tide. The Battle of Yorktown in 1781 marked a decisive defeat for British forces. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, formally ended the war and recognized the United States of America as the first independent nation in the Americas. After independence, an even greater challenge emerged: how to unify 13 separate states into a single functioning nation. Initially, the U.S. operated under the Articles of Confederation, a loose alliance of states with a weak central government. But this system soon proved ineffective. In 1787, a group of founding fathers, led by James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, convened the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. The result was the creation of the U.S. Constitution, a groundbreaking document that laid the foundation for representative democracy and the separation of powers that define modern governance. In 1789, George Washington was inaugurated as the first president of the United States, ushering in a new era for the fledgling nation, one founded on the ideals of liberty, equality, and civil rights. It was a land of many peoples, many faiths, and an enduring ambition to expand, explore, and redefine what a nation could be. Expansion, Civil War, and rise to power, 1800 to 1918. After gaining independence, the United States quickly shifted its focus to the next major goal, expanding westward. Driven by the belief in manifest destiny, the sacred mission to spread civilization, freedom, and democracy from the Atlantic to the Pacific, the U.S. began a new era of territorial growth. In 1703, under President Thomas Jefferson, the U.S. signed the Louisiana Purchase Treaty with France for $15 million. This deal not only doubled the size of the country, but also granted the U.S. control over the entire Mississippi River Basin, a vital inland trade route. The Second War between the U.S. and Britain, 1812 to 1815, broke out due to trade conflicts and British naval impressment of American sailors. Despite Washington, D.C. being burned by British forces, the U.S. maintained its independence and solidified its sovereignty. The Treaty of Ghent, about 1815, ended the war with no territorial changes. In 1818, the U.S.-Canada border was established along the 49th parallel. In 1845, the U.S. annexed Texas, a region that had previously declared independence from Mexico and formed its own republic. This move sparked the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848. American forces captured Mexico City, leading to the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, through which Mexico ceded California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and other territories, bringing the U.S. to the Pacific coast. In 1867, the U.S. purchased Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million, a deal marked at the time as Seward's Folly. However, Alaska would later prove to be strategically valuable and resource-rich. Alongside territorial expansion came the displacement of Native American tribes. Waves of white settlers pushed westward, sparking violent conflicts. Indigenous peoples were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands and confined to reservations, marking a painful chapter in American history. A growing economic and social divide emerged between the industrial North and the agrarian South, which heavily depended on slavery. While the North pushed for abolition, the South saw slavery as essential to its cotton-based economy. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln, a candidate from the Republican Party, won the presidency on a platform opposing the expansion of slavery. In response, 11 southern states seceded, forming the Confederate States of America. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, the bloodiest conflict in U.S. history, ensued. The war pitted the Union North, led by President Lincoln and General Ulysses S. Grant, against the Confederacy South, commanded by General Robert E. Lee. In 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring the abolition of slavery a moral objective of the war. After numerous brutal battles, the Union emerged victorious. In 1865, the Confederacy collapsed, and slavery was officially abolished across the nation through the 13th Amendment. Though the war ended, the U.S. entered a turbulent era known as Reconstruction, aiming to reunify the country, reintegrate the southern states, and protect the rights of newly freed African Americans. Starting in the 1870s, the U.S. entered the Industrial Age. The Transcontinental Railroad was completed, urbanization surged, and industries such as steel, oil, electricity, and finance expanded rapidly. Millions of immigrants from Europe, Irish, Germans, Italians, Poles, Jews, and others flooded into America, working in factories, coal mines, and helping build booming cities. This wave of immigration began shaping the multicultural identity of modern America. In foreign policy, the U.S. shifted from isolation to global expansion. In 1898, following the Spanish-American War, the U.S. gained control of the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam, and established significant influence over Cuba, marking its emergence as a naval power. When World War I erupted in 1914, the U.S. maintained neutrality, using the opportunity to sell weapons to both sides. However, events soon shifted public opinion. German U-boats attacked merchant ships, killing American civilians, most notably in the sinking of the Lusitania. The Zimmermann telegram, intercepted in 1917, revealed Germany's attempt to persuade Mexico to wage war against the U.S. in exchange for regaining Texas and California. These provocations outraged the American public. In 1917, President Woodrow Wilson declared war on Germany, joining the Allied powers, Britain, France, Russia. American troops played a decisive role in the war's final phase, helping turn the tide. In 1918, the war ended in an Allied victory. President Wilson proposed the 14 points for peace and was instrumental in founding the League of Nations, the forerunner of today's United Nations. Following the war, the United States emerged onto the global stage as a rising superpower, confident, ambitious, and increasingly responsible for shaping international order. This marked the beginning of America's influence throughout the 20th century and beyond. From world wars to modern superpower, 1919 to present. In 1929, the collapse of the Wall Street stock market triggered the Great Depression. Millions lost their jobs, thousands of banks went bankrupt, and American society plunged into hardship. In this context, President Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected and introduced the New Deal, a series of programs aimed at economic recovery, job creation, market regulation, and social reform. Though controversial, the New Deal laid the foundation for a stronger federal role in the economy, a model that still influences the U.S. today. When World War II broke out in Europe in 1939, the U.S. initially maintained a stance of neutrality. However, concerned about the rise of Nazi Germany and militarist Japan, the U.S. secretly supported the Allies through the Lend-Lease Act, providing weapons to Britain, the Soviet Union, and China. Everything changed on December 7, 1941, when Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, destroying much of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. President Roosevelt declared war, officially bringing the United States into the global conflict. The U.S. quickly became the world's industrial arsenal, producing weapons and logistics on an unprecedented scale while deploying troops on two major fronts, Europe and the Pacific. In Europe, the U.S. played a vital role in defeating Nazi Germany through operations like the D-Day landing in Normandy. In Asia, the U.S. used the island-hopping strategy to approach Japan. In August 1945, after Japan refused to surrender unconditionally, the U.S. dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing over 200,000 people. Japan surrendered, and the war officially ended. Shortly after, on April 25, 1945 in San Francisco, the United States and 50 other nations founded the United Nations, laying the groundwork for a post-war international order aimed at maintaining global peace and security. After the war, 2 former allies, the United States and the Soviet Union, quickly turned into ideological rivals in a decades-long confrontation known as the Cold War. The U.S. championed capitalism and liberal democracy, while the Soviet Union stood for communism. Both sides engaged in an arms race, space competition, formed military alliances, and exerted political influence over third world countries. The U.S. adopted a policy of containment to stop the spread of communism, leading to several military interventions. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953. The U.S. joined under the UN banner to defend South Korea from an invasion by North Korea and China. The Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, one of the longest and costliest conflicts in U.S. history. Despite military superiority, the U.S. struggled with guerrilla warfare and rising anti-war sentiment at home, eventually withdrawing without victory. In science and technology, the U.S. achieved a historic milestone by landing the first human on the moon in 1969, a symbolic victory in the space race against the Soviets. In 1991, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Cold War came to an end. The United States emerged as the sole superpower, dominating in economics, military strength, and global cultural influence. The post-Cold War era was not the long-lasting peace many had hoped for. Instead, the United States faced new and unprecedented challenges. On September 11, 2001, the country was shaken by terrorist attacks carried out by Al-Qaeda, killing nearly 3,000 people. It was the deadliest attack on U.S. soil in modern history. In response, President George W. Bush launched the War on Terror, starting with the invasion of Afghanistan, 2001, aimed at overthrowing the Taliban regime, which had sheltered Al-Qaeda. The Iraq War, 2003, justified by the need to eliminate weapons of mass destruction and spread democracy, though no such weapons were found. The war dragged on, causing immense losses and creating power vacuums that enabled extremist groups to rise. In 2008, Barack Obama became the first black president in U.S. history. He ended the Iraq War in 2011 and began a timeline for withdrawing from Afghanistan. By 2021, under President Joe Biden, the U.S. fully withdrew from Afghanistan, ending 20 years of war, though the swift return of the Taliban to power sparked intense domestic and global debate. Today, the United States consists of 50 states and 5 territories, including Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and American Samoa. The national flag has 50 stars representing the states and 13 red and white stripes symbolizing the original colonies that declared independence from Britain. The U.S. remains the country with the largest GDP in the world, leading in technology, culture, finance, and military power. It plays a central role in global institutions like NATO, the United Nations, G7, and G20. Yet, its power is accompanied by significant challenges. Still, the United States remains a global hub for innovation, home to tech giants, world-class universities, and unparalleled influence over global systems, continuing to shape the 21st century in profound ways.